All right, good morning, participants. We are going to be covering more of JavaScript in this refresher and the next for this week. We're having three sessions. This is the first of three. Um, Vukona, our facilitator from TIH in Pretoria, will be leading today's session. I'll be the wing, answering your questions and just interacting with you. Yeah, we're gonna have a really great session. Please come through like you did last week with your questions and your interactions. It was really great. Um, yes, so we'll be covering some variables, some arrays, a bit of logic. Yes, Avukana is going to take us right through it. I think we have waited long enough. Whenever you're ready, Vukana, please take the show away. Thank you.
All all right, morning. Josie, just to confirm you can hear me properly.
Loud and clear, brother.
All right, and then I'm going to share my screen. So I'm gonna need you to confirm that everything is actually visible.
All
Right,
right,
can
sure.
you read everything? Or should I zoom in?
You're in, you're in VS Code. It seems readable to me. A slight zoom, just a slight bit zoom.
Okay,
I think that's better. The participants will let us know if we should zoom some more, but I think you're good to go.
all right, thank you. Um, So like Lozi has hinted that we're going to go back to the basics. We're just going to cover a few concepts. Obviously, this was prompted because we saw a bit of some gaps during the interviews. So we thought it necessary to actually go back to some of the basics. So in my session, I'm going to be covering arrays and logic, like my fellow colleague has hinted at. But we might actually be doing this back and forth. So you guys should be getting ready to type because I'm going to be asking a few questions. This is not me being the star of the show. Today, it's all about you guys. So it's a refresher, basically almost like a reminder to some of the concepts already covered or the concepts that you guys already know. So that's why I need you guys to be a bit interactive. You can type in the chat. In some cases, you might want to talk, so Lozi is going to give you access to your microphones. But yeah, I'm going to focus on JavaScript. Last week, we focused on HTML and JavaScript. I'm going to start off with pure JavaScript. But before I do that, I need to create a file. I'm just going to call this index.js. Okay, that's all caps. This should be small caps. So as you all know, this is the standard for creating files. If you have something else, usually it will be index page, dash, and then the second word, instead of actually having that in all caps, because that doesn't make sense. So for this, we are also going to be touching a bit on GitHub. So I already have my browser open this side. I'm going to open GitHub so that I can link my project to GitHub. I'm going to log in. So I'm going to use my work account for this. And then, as you can see, I have all those projects on the left. I'm going to create a new project. So as you all know, repository is basically where we're going to store our files for a specific project. So everything that I'll create will come to this repo. So for this, I'm just going to say refresh TUT, short for tutorial, and it's going to be public. I don't need to change any of that. Create repository. And then for logging in, I'm using SSH. For anyone who's curious, you can send me an email and I'll send you a link on how to use SSH for logging in. It's something that I cannot cover because it has a lot of steps, unfortunately. But it allows you to actually have more than one account on your personal PC. So it's very handy. So I can actually switch from personal account to work account to any other Play account that I actually have on GitHub. So for this, we're going to git init. We're initializing our project with GitHub. And then we're going to git add. So this is already connected to an account. Git add, full stop for all. And then I'm going to use git status. So with git status, it allows us to see what we've actually added to our stage. As you can see, new file has been added, index.js. So what I can do from here, that's CLS, so I can go back to the top. What I can do from here is get remote add origin, and then I'm going to paste that URL that I just took. So we currently have nothing, but I can still push an empty file, but that doesn't make sense. So for now, this is all we're going to have. And then I didn't get commit because we currently have nothing. So the first few steps are done. And if you want to check if this is successful, there is a command called git remote v. So as you can see, this shows me the URL for the repo that I'm currently using. So that is successfully connected. And then back to this. We are going to be focusing on arrays, right? We're going to be focusing on arrays. So this is the first question. Before I jump straight to arrays, can you guys tell me what data types we have in JavaScript? You can send a chat or you can raise your hand to talk. What different data types do we have in JavaScript? Hi, Tabang. You have access to your mic.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm good, and yourself?
Good, good. Am I audible enough?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, in JavaScript we have numbers as a data type, and we have strings and the booleans and undefined. I think it's also part is undefined, and the null and yeah. That's how far my mind can remember. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I see we have a few more comments, but let me unmute you and then
Let me unmute for you so that you don't have your hands full.
okay, thank you.
All right.
So this is all correct, but was missing some.
Tolo Tane, you can speak. Please, we can hear you, but it's very, very soft. Can you turn up your volume, please? All right, we're gonna go with Garabo.
Hello, Mr. Bugwana.
Hi.
Yeah, the data types that we have in JavaScript is primitive and non-primitive data types, which primitives are numbers, strings, boolean, and symbols, and also what is that one? Yeah, and also we have non-primitive, which are object, array, undefined objects, arrays, and what are those? Yeah, all I can say is object and arrays.
All right, thank you. I think this covers, okay, I think this covers the most common data types that we have. For those who are familiar with, what is this? Those who are familiar with data structures, you know that you also have your lists and so on, but this is something that you actually create yourself, right? So I'm not going to go into that. We're going to be focusing on this guys right here. So does anyone want to?
And
Yes, Lozi?
sorry, we're gonna let me mute.
Okay, that was a mistake. Okay, so like you guys said, we have numbers, strings, boolean, undefined, null, symbols, objects, as well as arrays. We also have sets and so on, but this is something that most people actually don't use, but depending on the project you're working on, then you might have to use this. But then the others are the most common ones that you actually come across in all different projects. So these guys, you need to know how to work with, how to grab data from, how to manipulate it, update, remove, and so on and so forth. So we have our data types, but then there's a specific keyword that we have, or keywords rather, in JavaScript that we have to declare our variables, because these are data types, but they cannot work on their own. So what are the different ways or the different keywords that we have for declaring our variables? Okay, I see we have Joseph. We can unmute.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh, yes. We can use let, we can use var, and we can use const.
Okay, while you're still here, can you explain the difference between those?
Okay, well, what I do know is that const is a bit more permanent, so we shy away from using const because it's what's what I'm looking for? Yeah, it's permanent, and then you use let. I think let var is when you can't use let is when you can't use const, and I don't remember var.
All right. Okay, thank you for that, Joseph. Ronald, you can talk.
Morning, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, yeah. So for let, it's when like you want to change that variable at a later stage, and then for var, it's when you don't know the type of when, when you don't know the type of the variable you're working with. So for instance, when you've working with like let's say a list of numbers, but you're not sure what the data type is that, and then you can use var for that.
Mm. Okay, I'm not so sure about the var one, but these two are actually almost the same. It also allows you to change the variable. So can anyone tell us what's the difference between these two? Garabo, you still have your hand up. Let me see if, okay, you are the only one who has a hand up. You can talk, Garabo.
Okay, the difference between let and var, let, remember the scoping. Now with let, you can be able to maneuver through your scoping, but with var, you can't do that because var is accessed when you're using it. It can be accessed everywhere on the on your project. So the let uh the let allows you to maneuver through the block scope, but the var does not do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Karabo. And that is correct. So const is permanent during the running of the program. So if you don't want to actually change it, you can protect whatever variable by using const. Let is block scoped. So if you actually declare this in a function, whatever variable you declare will only be accessible in that function, unless if you return its value outside. But otherwise, it will be limited to that function. Meanwhile, with var, you can actually access it from anywhere in the program. So these two are the most common one that we use for protecting our variables and making sure that we don't have unintended changes. Because with var, you can actually get lost in your own code if you are accessing maybe similar values, whereby in a function, you can keep on redeclaring a variable with the same name or different variables with the same name, and there's not going to be any changes that are unpredictable. Meanwhile, with var, you can actually get lost. You can have different functions that are calculating the overall sum. Maybe one is calculating profit, but you just said sum of that and that and that equals to, and then the total profit. So if you have that, meanwhile, in a different section of the program, you're just calculating two numbers. Somewhere else, maybe you're calculating the total of distance, but everywhere you're using sum. If you use var, the sum might actually calculate the distance instead of the total of whatever products that you actually have. So in this case, what I'm talking about could be something of maybe Uber Eats, where you have different totals that you need to calculate. Discounts, total discounts, you can have a sum for the total discount you need to get, total distance that the person has to travel, as well as the total itself, the subtotal, which is just calculating the actual product. Could also include VAT, depending on what kind of program you're writing. So this not really recommended in this day and age. And if you guys are opening software which is open source based on JavaScript, you'll see that this is only used once or twice. So this is now rarely used. There are some cases where you still want to use it, but it's rarely used, and these two are the most common. So these two are most common ways of declaring variables. So now that we have this, let's go ahead and actually declare some data, right? We are going to run through all of them, but we're going to be focusing mostly on this. So for this part, I'm just going to go ahead and actually do this. So this is going to be a number. So should it be age? Most common example that I can think of, age, we have that 35. String, this in most cases, examples that we use is for names. So we can say surname becomes, this will be me. So another thing that you need to be aware of, as you can see here, with a number, I just went straight to typing this, but then with surname, I cannot just go straight to this. So in JavaScript, you need to use double quotations for strings, or you can also use single quotations. Both are actually allowed. So we can have first name, and then single quotations, we have V. These are both valid, but this basically means that this is a string, and that's also a string. But we also have something called string literals. So this is where you use the grave symbol. So we can say age as string equals to, then you have that. Actually, this is a string literal. So in here, you can type any valid string, it will allow you, but it's most commonly used if you want to actually combine strings and numbers without using the plus sign after. So you can actually just do it like this and then type the actual age inside. So this will be turned into a string because of this quotation as well as that. So this becomes a string literal. Obviously, if you want to type everything else, you can also have that is my age. So you don't actually need to use a plus sign as you would this side. So it becomes handy for if you actually want to minimize your code, make it a bit more readable. So those are 3 ways you can actually work with strings. And then let's go ahead and have some changeable data, shall we? This one will be for gender is male equals to true. So with the Boolean, everyone knows, hopefully everyone knows, this means it needs to be true or false. True or false. Those are your Boolean values. So in a Boolean, we only want it to be either true or false. There's no other value that you can have in a Boolean. And then with undefined, there's 2 ways to declare something as undefined. If you want to outright declare it, you can have is rich. So in this case, this is supposed to be a Boolean, for example, but then you can actually go straight and type it as undefined. So when you actually console log this, it will go straight to saying this is undefined. I'm actually supposed to write is rich. This side we run our node. For those who do not have Node, since that's what I'm using because I'm not using a browser, you can download Node from this website or send this in the chat. So you can use that link to download Node and install it, and you should be able to access this tool that I'm currently using that allows me to run JavaScript outside of the browser. But I actually need to do this. Where are you? Need to move this to the right, and then I'm going to close the left side. In terms of the question that I had in terms of the let and var, I see Mulanga has commented on the chat, but they are now talking about what's called hoisting, which is something everyone in JavaScript should know, but it's one of those things that you guys might actually get lost in. But they're talking about hosting. I do recommend that everyone actually checks that out so that you guys are actually familiar with it. I've also sent that to the chat. It's something that you guys will need to know. They sometimes ask this in JavaScript interviews, but it's a bit complex in terms of understanding it. So we have that. This is how you declare. This becomes your keyword. This becomes the name of the variable, and then this becomes the value. So this is the structure that, nope, that's not what I want. This is the structure that we follow when we create variables. We have the declaration keyword, followed by the variable name, followed by equal sign if you're going to assign. So it's followed by the equal sign, and then the last thing that we have is the actual value. But however, if you don't want to do this, you can also do it this way. Let, oh, this is not protected. We'll say unassigned. You can also do it this way. And then by default, this actually will give it the value undefined. This will become undefined. So it is declared, but then it doesn't actually have value. So by default, this and this will more or less return the same value. Because if we have this unassigned, Save that, come this side. As you can see, it still says undefined. So this and this is basically the same thing. By default, your values are all undefined until you give it a specific value. But if you're using const, you are not allowed to actually do it this way. So if I was to try and do this, maybe second age, as you can see, it's underlining because I need to initialize. So initializing just means first time you declare the keyword, you declare the variable, you also need to give it a specific value. So you cannot have a const variable as undefined. And the reason for that is because you cannot update it. Once the program runs, whatever value is given, that's what the value would actually be for the remainder of that program or a function, whatever it is. So this cannot have undefined as a value on the const. Unless if you are declaring it specifically like this, then you can, but you need to initialize it directly. So these are things that you actually need to know. Obviously, all data types in JavaScript have methods. And I think this is where I need to, yes, Pule. Where are you allowed to talk? You can talk, Pule.
Okay, am I audible enough?
Yes, you are audible.
Since you said is rich is you initialized it to undefined. What about, does that mean if you say if you declare is rich and not assign it, just leave it as it is, does that automatically put it undefined, declare it as undefined? Or
Good question. Yes, as you can see, if I run the program, now is rich is just undefined.
okay, thank you.
So if you don't initialize, by default, all your values will become undefined. So they know that they exist, but there's no specific value given to it, so it just becomes undefined. And then you can also set it to null if you want, depending on what the use case is. But null can also mean that the variable itself does not exist. So that becomes the data type of that specific variable that you're trying to call that is non-existent. So with that, we'll see it as we continue going with the other sessions. It becomes hard to explain when you're just doing it like this because you can assign a variable directly to null and it still works the same way as I just did it here. But in most cases, this is during the running of the program. That's when you're actually going to see something saying it's null and you actually need to figure out why your variable does not actually have something. But anyway, continuing from this, we now need to focus on methods. Does anyone want to explain what methods are in JavaScript? Well, in the case of what we are looking at here, so we currently have a number, we have a string. We currently don't have arrays. That will be what I focus on after here. But every data type has a method that's embedded into it. So does anyone want to explain? Let me see if we have two hands up. Let me see who hasn't.
Mulanga. Mulanga, you can speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, my voice is a bit ashy. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes,
I was going to
yeah.
say methods are simply a block of code we can create a whole logic of code so that in our main file it doesn't look so complicated. We can just call the method each time and we don't need to repeat that code. So in that block of code we can create a logic code in which maybe how we add numbers, subtract numbers, whatever logic of code we have in that block, so that in the main code we can just call it without repeating code.
All right, correct. But before you go, can you now change that to answer specifically in terms of this part? So right now, because I already declared a variable called age, age now has a method or methods, countless methods that are now attached to it, as well as the surname and first name. So in that case, how can you explain those methods? It's not something that I wrote specifically.
Sorry, could you repeat your question?
So with the methods that you're explaining it in terms of if I'm the one writing my own code, right? Whereby
Yes.
I am specifying the methods, I'm specifying the getters and setters. So basically as
Yes.
if I'm the one creating my own class. But in this
Yes.
case, that's already given to me. So the moment I declare a variable like this, which is a string, JavaScript already does that for me. There's already methods there. So can you explain those methods in terms of embedded methods instead of what I create?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if I'm understanding.
Does someone else want to give it a try? Thank you,
Senzo,
Malanga.
let's give
Okay,
Senzo a
thank
chance.
you.
All right.
Senzo, please take it.
Senzo?
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
we
you
can
are.
hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying already I was attempting to answer the first question. So the second one I didn't understand.
Okay, answer the first one then.
Okay, so a method is like a function that belongs to an object, right? So it's like a special action that an object can perform.
Okay, I'll take that. So you are both correct. So in this case, in terms of the question that I was asking, right? It's functions embedded on the data types themselves. So we don't actually need to create them. You can extend if you want, a bit complex, but you can actually extend these data types. But in this case, it's functions embedded on the data types in JavaScript. So an example for this is on surname, for example, this is a string, and you all know that a string is just a combination of characters.
Or is it like those to uppercase, to lowercase, what?
Yes, those are methods.
Okay, like are you referring to them as like the embedded functions?
Yes.
Okay.
So these are done by JavaScript itself. It's something that we actually don't actually have to write. So every data type already has methods assigned to it. For example, as you can see, you have all of this. So you have all of these methods until value of. So we have something called trim. This is very handy for verification purposes. And what I mean by that, when people are trying to register, right? I remember on our first session, there was some sort of data that we're actually working with, trying to get an input from the actual view in HTML. So in this case, if someone types something like this as a username, let me console log this. If you're going to get that, let's say surname, if you're going to get that data, as you can see, this becomes an empty character, making this have a character that maybe the user actually typed by mistake, because sometimes there's not enough space to see blank spaces as you're typing. So there's a function or a method called trim, which removes those spaces. And now that space is gone. So in validation, you actually use this a lot. If you're trying to check if a string is empty, for example, an input, if they type that this is actually not empty, we are not supposed to be doing conditionals right now, but let's just do this. If surname, because this is how people usually check if something is empty, right? If it's empty, then you log surname is required. This is just an example. If I remove that, now we have an empty space. What happens? We run that. Surname is required is actually not showing us anything. But then this is empty. Is it something that we can actually store in a database? Of course not.
Vukana, there's
Yes.
a hand from Tulufeto. Would you like to take it, or how would you like to handle this? Should he
It's
ask
fine.
it?
If it's a question, they can go ahead.
All right. You have the floor, Tulu.
Okay, maybe it
Tulufeto.
was
All right. We can continue.
maybe it was a mistake. So with a dot trim, it allows you to actually remove all the spaces that may be typed by mistake. Then we come this side, as you can see, surname is now required. Sulufeto, do you wanna speak? I'm going to take that as a no. So that's one method that you have, but you also have another one that allows you to check for the length of the characters. In this case, we can just say surname dot length, and then this is actually not a method, this is a property. My bad, this is a property that exists. It's also embedded. As you can see, that just returns the size of the blank spaces. And that's correct. That was 4 sizes long, but it was empty. So we have those methods. We also have properties that actually exist. So this is property. And for those who are familiar with objects, then you know what a property is. You have those key and value pairs that actually exist. But in this case, this just returns the value of whatever data you currently have in there. So
Sorry,
we
please repeat
have,
that. Somebody just asked in the chat that very thing you were just saying. Could you guys kindly please repeat it? What is the difference between a property and a method?
a method is basically a function, as you can see here. And a function has those brackets. So the moment you see this, then you know it's a function. This is how you call a function. But if it follows something else, in this case, it follows the variable that we have, it's a dot, then the name of the function with the curly braces. So this is now a method. For those who are familiar with classes, a method is basically just a function embedded in a class. In the case of a property, it's the same thing. It's also embedded in the variable, but then it doesn't have the curly braces. So you don't call it, you just refer to it. Meanwhile, with this, you're actually calling it, then it runs whatever it needs to run in the background, and then it returns the value to you. Meanwhile, with this, it just returns whatever value it has. But they are allowing you to access data about this guy. So in the case we are accessing more data about the surname, this side we are manipulating that data first before we actually do something with the data. For example, here we use .trim, so we're actually removing the spaces that we have before we check if the spaces actually do have at least one character inside. Otherwise, we're saying it's surname is required. Meanwhile, with this one, it just returns whatever value. There is no manipulation to this data type. But we are still going to do objects. When we do objects, that's when you're actually going to see kind of the difference. But this is the key, then the actual answer becomes the value. Right. With that said, I hope everyone is covered in terms of this. I didn't use var because we hardly use it these days, but we have the const. And obviously, if you want to update this, we have the ismail equals to true. If I try to go back to age and I try to update it to 20, this should give us an error. CLS, go back to the top. By the way, for me to actually get back these commands, I'm using the up and down arrow, so I don't have to retype everything. As you can see, it says we have an error right here, assignment to constant variable. So whenever you're going to see this in your code, that means you're trying to reassign a constant variable. And as you can see, JavaScript is a bit lazy because it doesn't actually show me any error in this line. But the moment you try to run the program, then that's when it actually gives you the hint. You have a bug that you actually need to get rid of. Actually, it's an error more than a bug. So we remove that. What we can reassign in this case is anything that has let on it. So if you wanted to say ismail, and then this will be equals to false. If I come this side, run that, it still runs. And if I console log, you'll see that ismail is now going to be set to false.
Okay, we have a few questions. So, Pule wanted to know on lines 12 and 13, why did you use single quotation marks? I guess instead of double. Okay, okay, I'll let you answer that one and then I'll hit you with the next one. There's even a hand. Let's tackle a hand first. Tolazani, please speak.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, with line 13, I'm also having the same issue. I'm creating those values with the single quotation marks. Um, and it's coming out as a comment instead. I see you trying to instill the variable into the string so that when you call or print out the string, the variable is printed out there automatically, and you can change it as needed if you're going to increment it. But I'm struggling to now make my line the same way you've made your line. So I'm not sure if those are single or double quotation marks. They don't look like it at all.
Yes, you are correct. So this symbol is different from this. So this is a double quotation, right? This is the single quotation, which I think everyone is aware of this too. But this one in JavaScript is a string literal. On most keyboards, it's before the one number. So
Oh,
just underneath escape on most keyboards. That's where you should find it.
all right.
So
Thank you.
shift. So when you press shift, this is the symbol that you get. Without the shift, you get that string literal.
So some they call it like a backtick.
Backtick or grave, it actually goes by many names.
Yeah. So it's up there. I don't know if those who are carrying a Mac, it's next to your shift, and on a Windows PC, it's at the top corner, left top corner. It's different from your thing. Okay, do you want to take? There's another one. Corner. It says, isn't a method always expect a parameter and argument, and a property doesn't expect anything? It goes back to that question of the difference between a property and a method. I don't know if you...
A method doesn't always expect an argument to be passed into it. As long as you can call it like this, that means it's a method, because essentially it's a function. But then there are methods whereby you actually need to pass it a function. You'll see this a lot when we're working with arrays. Most of the array methods actually expect arguments to be passed into it. And those arguments, in some cases, are actually other functions. So we're still going to go into that, but you don't always need to pass an argument to a method.
Okay, so
before you continue the questions, I think there was one person who asked about why I use this and all of that. So the benefit of using the grave symbol, there are some cases where you actually want to take a value from a variable and you combine it into an actual string, like I did here. So the normal way of doing it, people would actually do it like this, whereby you have two strings and then you add a space before you add whatever it is. V is maybe 35, right? But because the 35 is already a variable, you'd probably need to do it like this and then have another. So in this case, you can actually remove the first plus, and then that becomes a first string, and then you add a number. So this becomes a new string, which has these words as well as a variable inside, right? If I console log that, actually I'm going to take, I feel like I should take everything out or create a new file at this point, but let's go ahead and console log line 12, first name, because I think someone asked about that. As you can see, it says V is 35, but if I console log this as well, it's going to combine that. Right? So 35 is my age. So this just allows you to do this without a lot of hassle, because if you're going to do it this way and you're adding a lot of variables, there's some instances where you need to combine this string with maybe 3 different variables or 4. So now you end up having a lot of plus signs in your code where you're doing this. V is 35, surname maybe is whatever, you have another plus sign. As you can see, this is already becoming a bit messy. So if you actually want to concatenate strings and variables, it becomes messy like this, but then with this way, you just have to do that and add another variable, and then so on and so forth. This for me is more preferable compared to that. This is not wrong, but at some point it's not as readable. So that's why we use the backticks or the grave symbol. But this is all valid syntax of how to write a string in JavaScript. This is all allowed. So that's why I had to show you guys all the different 3 ways of doing it. All this is valid.
can we take a question?
Yes, we can take a question and a minute break.
All right. We're gonna start with Mbali. You can come through.
Good morning. So
Morning.
I noticed that there's a lot of properties and methods for a specific object. So I just want to know, do we need to know all of them, or are they essential ones that we're supposed to know?
The essential ones, not necessarily, but then there's the common ones that you need to know. With string, it's It actually varies on the use case. So when it comes to what you need to know in terms of the method, right? What you need to know is there's a use case for everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything, because here we're looking at removing. So for me, this has become a very common method that I use in most of my code, because in most of my code, we are doing registration forms, logins, and I always need to make sure that when I'm checking if a user has typed in their username, for example, it's not actually just blank spaces, because if I store that in a database, who is blank? 4 characters blank, like that doesn't make any sense. So in that case, .trim has become my go-to for validating information. But then there's some cases where you want to check for, let's say, actually, nope, I don't want that. Age a string, add. There's this one called char_add. Char_add is basically looking, as you can see, it auto-completes there. That's why I like VS Code. This is actually just looking for a character at a specific position. There are some cases where you might want to use this, but it's not every time that you might actually want to use this method. So there is a lot of methods, but there's a use case for everything. As you can see, char_add is now returning 3. There's someone who asked if methods always need an argument, and this is one of those use cases where you actually need to send an argument. And in this case, 350, I mean space and then I. So at 3, which is the index, we have that. If I type
Yep.
0, we now
I have a
have
question.
3. Yes.
All right. Okay. Ronald, you can come through.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just want to ask on line 22, when you use .tree, can you use .length instead? For example, let's say a user wants to type 2 names and there's a space in between, but you used .tree. Won't that combine those 2 names?
Let us see. Will it? Let's say surname. There's people who have surnames like that, right? Where you actually have a space in between. Let
Yeah.
us see what happens. Surname.trim else. We're just going to console log the surname as is, right? Dkek.
Okay, so in
So
between it doesn't remove the space.
no, it removes from the end or the beginning.
Okay, okay.
So this is just to make sure that your data is actually cleaned up, so that if someone actually makes a mistake and types Dkek like that, then that means their name basically has spaces in between. Imagine what happens now if this is an email and you are doing your own login authentications. You are not using anything that actually has Auth or Firebase, whereby they actually handle some of the data for you. So you actually need to make sure that all the data is cleaned up properly. It meets the specifications, because now if a person types Dkek, this is an email. Let's say this is an email, for example. I know it's not an email, but the left spaces are behind, and then you don't actually trim the blank spaces. That means every time they log in, if they write dkek@gmail.com, they need to leave those spaces. But then they might have made a mistake. They don't remember leaving spaces in there. So now they have an account, but they don't have an account, because now it's going to restore twice.
Okay, okay, I see. Please. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So maybe that's something that I forgot to mention. It only removes the spaces here and here. If it exists in between, you are good to go.
There's a guy called Tabang. I would just like him to explain more his question so that we can answer. Tabang, please pull through.
Okay, hi. No, I
Hello,
was
Tabang.
just hi. I was just adding a comment regarding the string literal that basically it makes a code easier to read and hear. Yeah, when it comes to line 13, yes, I was just adding a comment. I was not asking a question.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Just touch again the difference between a function and a method to Connor, which they're just not really getting it. That is it's basically the same thing.
Okay, guys. I believe the last session that we were going to have, it's on Thursday. We did plan to cover objects, and because you guys seem to also be struggling with that, I think we are going to dive deeper into objects, where you're going to see clearly the difference between a method and what is this? This is going to be on Thursday. We will cover fully because that needs you guys to actually see the examples side by side. We'll cover methods versus functions. Are you guys good with that? That will be our last session. Are you comfortable with that?
There's a question from Garabo.
Yes, you can come through.
Yeah, Mr. Vukona, I think in to understand it in a broader space, it's to understand as you have said, objects and also OPP because OPP explains it well. That we have getters and setters. Surely you know them. We have getters and setters. We have methods. We have yeah, which is OPP when working with classes. Remember, an object is a constructor. In a flippy in a what can I say? The another name of an object is like a constructor. Then inside that object, there's methods, there's properties, there's static properties, there's properties that you can methods that you can pass in perimeters. So I think to understand it in a broader aspect, you need to understand classes, objects, OPP, and that's where you'll get it. Because remember, you see now, when it comes to trim is a method, which is it's a function. Okay? And the dot length it's like a getter. It's like a getter. It gets whatever character that is in the surname string. So it counts how many characters are in the surname string, and then it gets the length of that character. So dot length is not per se a method, but it's a getter. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you very much, Karabo. So yes, like Karabo has stated,
We have
in order
another
for
question.
you, yeah, I'll come back to the question,
Oh,
Lozi. So in terms
right.
of what Karabo is saying, in order for you guys to understand what's happening here, what's happening there, it is advisable to start with OOP, which is what's going to be covered. Objects and classes will be fully covered on Thursday. So that's where we're going to dive deeper and you guys will be able to see side by side what's happening when you have method versus an actual function. But at the end of the day, they're more or less the same thing. They're running through blocks of code and actually assigning a variable that's actually returned into. So this method is basically running through whatever code they've written at the back end and then returning the value that's actually going to be compiled by JavaScript. It's not something that I did. But on this day, we are going to do everything. We are going to write our own getters and setters, our own properties, creating our own objects, and then we'll dive deeper into how to do something like this. And then we also had a comment about this. In JavaScript, we have two ways of checking if something is equal to something, right? We have the double equal sign, we also have the triple equal sign. We usually use the triple equal sign because this is more precise. But this is usually for numbers, because with numbers, it doesn't check if, let us do this, console log, let us check if 32 equals to 32, for example. Right? This is going to give us true, as you can see there. But is 32 really equals to 32? No, it's not, because this is the number and this is a string. So we usually use the triple because of that. As you can see, it now says false. So we are now just stuck into doing it like this for everywhere we were checking, because this allows for type safety to be in your project, whereby you're always making sure that this and this is the same value and is always of the same data type. So this side, even if you're using the double equal sign, it would work. But then as a JavaScript developer, we are now stuck into the mentality of using three equal signs because of when we're working with numbers. And like I said, in normal programs, you work with numbers a lot. So it has become common practice to just stick to this way of doing things. So Josie, you said we have another question.
Yes, it was I think two people, but they put their hand down. One of them was Felicia. Sorry. If you guys have anything, please raise your hands. We'll kind of like to. There we go. Felicia is back. You can talk, Felicia. You can unmute Felicia. Well, we can't hear you if you're speaking. Felicia. Okay, we're gonna move on to Samsung SMA336E. Samsung, you may speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Samsung.
Sorry, my name is Nelson.
Hello,
Sorry,
Nelson.
I was not aware that it gave me a different name. My question was, if we are comparing strings, do we use the triple equal to, or we use equal to ignore case?
No, that is fine. You can use the equal sign. This has just become common practice for some of us to stick to using it like this, with the triple equal to.
The reason why I asked, I'm asking based on strings. Let's say we have capital letter W and small letter w. Will it give
Let
us
us
the
see
same
what
value?
happens. I hope you have your answer.
I can't see. I think I don't.
It's false. Remember, when it comes to strings in any programming language, they actually are given symbols, right? So it's comparing dot symbols instead of just checking if something is equals to W. So in order to make sure that it is the same, you'd actually have to use, where are you? To lowercase. This is another method. And then you'd have to do the same thing to the other side to make sure that the left and right are always in the same case format before you actually check.
So if I may ask, the equal to ignore case does not function this side.
No, because they're both strings. So In JavaScript, we have something called, what is this? I'm forgetting the actual term, but yes, implicit and explicit conversion between different data types before it checks values. So with the numbers, that's why if you have 35 in quotations with the other side just being a number, it's implicitly changing one of them to match the other data type first. So with the equal sign like this, it's checking, right? But it changes the data type first so that both data types are actually the same. But then when you use the triple equal sign, it's checking the data type as well as the actual value, not just the value itself. It does not try to convert. So if you want direct conversion, you have to explicitly say so by changing that number to a string or the string into a number. I hope you're answered.
Okay, thank you.
All right, my pleasure.
Do I take a break or answer 3 questions?
I can answer 2 questions.
Okay. Senzo, let's start. Okay. Matume, please come through.
Oh, so hi. I'd like to ask on line number 37. He used like to local lowercase or to local lowercase. I mean, so isn't there a method in JavaScript that says like equals to ignore case? Yeah, dot equals to ignore case, similar to Java.
Not that I've used before.
Yes, because in Java there's this method that equals to ignore case. It just literally changes, compares the string, ignoring all the cases.
Yeah, in JavaScript, you kind of have to do that yourself.
Okay, thanks.
So in terms of your question, different programming languages go a deep further in terms of supplying some of the methods, but not all languages may have the same use case. So across different languages, you might find that there's a method that you're looking for that is not there, or it's written a bit differently, or you actually need to write it yourself. But in most cases, there's 1 or 2 methods that you're used to that does not exist in other languages.
Okay, I understand.
All right. So that was the first question.
Okay. Pule, please come through. And then we'll end with Senzo. Pule, you have the floor.
I'm speaking. Am I not audible?
Okay, you're audible now.
Mr. Pugon, I saw a method there saying to local lowercase and to lowercase. I just does the to local lowercase it works on that line only, and then to lowercase after lowercasing that string it continues to be like that afterwards. What's the difference between the two? Okay, I want to know the difference between to local lowercase and to lowercase.
Honestly, the most common one is to lowercase. I made a mistake by using to local lowercase, but then that's usually the character. What do they call it? The chasset, if I'm not mistaken. That's the difference. We also have something similar when you're working with data types. I mean, not data types, date and time. There is the local date and time, and then there's the normal date and time. So it's usually the chasset that is a bit different.
Okay.
Okay.
But the most
Senzo,
common one is just to lowercase. I made a mistake by using the other method.
Thank you for Connor. The last one, Senzo, please pull through.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay,
Hello.
so I wanted to ask on the issue of the integers and strings. Like when we test the conditions, do we use the equals to for all of them?
Can you give me an example? I'm going to put the
Yeah, for
console.
example, in Java, we when we
Yeah.
are working with strings, we use things like dot equals to, dot is, but again, equals to it, no case, stuff like that. And then when we are dealing with integers, then we are using the equals to signs.
Okay, so in JavaScript, mostly to check if something is the same, unless if you're working with objects and arrays, where you might actually need to loop through something or iterate through the object and stuff. We normally just check it ourselves using this. Are there other ways of doing it? Yes, but this is the most common.
Okay, so meaning we deal with strings the same way that we deal with integers.
More or less, yes.
Okay.
And then I see Felicia commented in the chat. In regards to the sessions for HTML and CSS, there were no CSS and HTML sessions last year, guys. We saw that in terms of the interview, we saw that most people are actually struggling with JavaScript. It's not HTML or CSS, and those two are actually very easy to pick up. Obviously, the more you work with HTML and CSS, the more you pick up and the more you remember, more of it is stored in memory. But in terms of JavaScript, you saw that people can write code. We suspect that some people might have used AI for the task that we actually had. But anyway, people can write code, but then sometimes they don't actually understand what they're writing. So the JavaScript sessions are just to make sure that we are all on the same pace before we actually start, that before we actually do the final selections, everyone is on the same place, and we can actually better pick from you guys. So there were no sessions for HTML and CSS. The main problem that we have is JavaScript. You guys can write code, but sometimes you do not fully understand what is happening. Just like now, we saw that there's a bit of a gap on objects and classes because some are still struggling with methods, which was something already planned to cover on Thursday, right? So during the interview, we saw the gaps that we have in JavaScript, and these three sessions are just an extension of the other one that we had 2 weeks back. So we're just continuing from there. No HTML and CSS though. You might have to do that on your own time. So that was to Felicia and everyone else who might be wondering what happened to the CSS and HTML sessions. Our focus was on JavaScript. Lozi,
All
I
right.
think we can take a break before we jump into the arrays and start complicating things.
All right. How long would you like to take the break for? Until
I'm good with 5. I'm not sure about others. They might need a water and a bathroom break.
okay. How about we rendezvous back here at 10:30 on the dot?
All right, I'm good with that.
All right. Please take a comfort break. Everyone get some water, stretch your legs, visit the bathroom, and then we'll be back right here again to continue our session at 10:30 on the dot. Thank you, everyone. All right, we're back.
All right, we are back. So we're working a bit on GitHub, right? But before I send that through, just a mini recap. We covered the different data types that we have in JavaScript. Let's move this a bit, which is your numbers, your strings, your Boolean, your undefined, your null, your symbols, your objects and arrays. And then we went into the declaring keywords that we have in JavaScript, which is the let, const, and var. And then well, you guys actually explain what those are. Const is permanent during the running of the program. If it's in a function, during the running of that function, the moment it closes, you can then update it with a different value. But this is one of the most common ways of declaring a variable. And then we also have the let. It allows changing of variables, but it is block scoped, and it's also one of the common. So these two are the most common. And then we have var, which is rarely used, but it allows changing of variables, and it's also not block scoped. And then with the block scope, we said if this is declared in a function, you only have access to it inside that function. This, however, it can be declared inside the function, but you have access to it from everywhere else in the program. So it's not restricted wherever it's declared. It's accessible publicly. And then we declared some variables here. We had a number, which was in the form of an integer. And then we had a string. We had another string using a single quotation. The first one used a double quotation. We used a grave symbol or the backtick symbol to have a combination of our string as well as a declared variable. So here you can actually write any JavaScript that is valid. Any valid JavaScript can be written here. You can actually even call functions inside this string literal as long as it's in the $ and the curly braces. This is valid JavaScript. As you can see, this is also valid JavaScript. It's the name of a variable. And then we had another variable that was a Boolean, and then we said with the Booleans, they can only be true or false. And then we also had another one which was null. We set it to null, and then the other one which was undefined because we didn't give it a value. So this is implicitly defined as undefined compared to the other one where we actually set it to default undefined when we wrote it here earlier. And then here we're removing any spaces that might actually be at the end or the start of our string to make sure that we are checking if someone typed it like this, it's actually really empty, or if it's really not empty. So it needs to have some characters inside to make sure that that is actually valid. And then here we're just returning the size of the string that we have. And then we updated our ismail Boolean value to false. Meanwhile, it was actually true in the beginning. And then we console logged that. And then we also were looking for a specific character, which is character is one symbol, right? It can be a W, it can be an H, it can be a number, it can be a space, but we're looking for one specific character at the beginning of the string. That's what that symbolizes. Or you can actually use it for any other index in the string. Right, and then here we're doing conditional checking to see if this matches what's on the right, but because the strings themselves are actually of different cases, we're making sure that they're all the same case. In this case, we're actually moving it to lowercase, making sure that this is also to lowercase before we checked. And we have all of that. So now we are done with the first part. I'm going to clear my terminal, and then we're going to push this to GitHub. So we're going to git add. If I run git status to check what's happening, as you can see, we have a new file, as we already had the other time. New file, I didn't commit it. We had the new file, and then we modified the file. So this is why this is currently in red. This is an indicator by Git to let you know that you actually have changes on this file that are actually not added. So they're currently not in the staging area. So if we git add all, I can git add all or git add a specific file. Right now, we only have one file. So I can actually just type git add index.js. If I go back to git status, it still says new file, but as you can see, the modified section is now gone. It's no longer there. So that means all the changes are now staged. So now I can commit this. So in order to commit, it's git commit -m and then whatever message you want to type. So I'll say back to basics for this. So that is successful. The moment you see this, that means whatever you are doing is actually successful. The file has been created. So Git is successfully tracking that. So now I can git push you origin. Actually, let's just do it that way. Let us see. Git push you origin main. Main does not match any, and this is because my Git branch is probably set to master. So I'm going to have this to change our branch to main. Let us see what happens. So this is actually allowing you to set the branch that you actually want to push to. So now I have git push u origin main. This is actually setting upstream so that whatever happens on our repository, I can actually track it from this side and vice versa. So now they're set to track one another. And as you can see, branch main set up to track origin main. So now we're good. We can actually push this. Hopefully I have access. Okay, it says up to date. Let's refresh. And there is our file. So the first part is already done in terms of GitHub. Now we're going to continue with the next part. We already worked with most of this. We now need to
Please add me as
introduce these two guys.
please add
Yes,
me as a collaborator so they can see.
add you.
Yes, so I can clone from you tomorrow morning.
Okay, to add a collaborator, for those who have never added a collaborator, you go to settings, you go to collaborators. This is all the information about the repository. You can rename if you want. I'm not going to do that. You have more options this side. I'm just goes to go straight to collaborators, and then down here I can add people. Lozi, am I adding your work email?
Yes, please.
All right, that's lozi at mlab.co.za. And then I can add lozi, so I'm good with that. And as you can see here, it says 0 collaborators, 1 invitation. So I think tomorrow you will accept the invitation and continue from here. As you can see, it was able to grab the rest of his information, so pending invite. Right, now we go back to our file. Still over there. We don't have a README yet, and I'm okay with that. So now we continue from here. So I'm going to scroll down. we are going to now work on arrays and objects. But before I do that, can I ask what is an array and what is an object?
Go ahead, Mikey. Mickey?
Well, good morning. I would like to answer the array. An array
Okay.
is used to store multiple elements in a single variable.
Okay, what is the format of the element?
The format of the element,
Yes.
maybe if I can say let causes is equals to something, and then you say console log in brackets and then place causes. Yes.
Huh?
Okay, got you. But you're saying multiple elements. Are these elements the same? Are they different? Like, what kind of data type essentially would they be?
Well, you can use multiple data types, like including numbers, strings, and objects. So, yeah.
Okay. And then how do you know that this variable is actually an array
Um,
in JavaScript?
I mean, you can, uh, create a. Yeah, I mean, yeah, creating an.
Okay, does someone want to help Mickey out?
Uh, we have. All right, Clementine.
Okay, we can identify an array by using the corner brackets.
Okay, so this uses the square brackets, correct. And then does anyone want to explain the object?
Okay, let's give Katleho a chance.
Square brackets. Okay.
Hello,
Hello, you can come through.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear us?
All right. Morning to everyone.
Please mute if you are not speaking. Please kindly mute to the
You
participants.
you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You
Yes.
can come through.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. What I can say is that an object is a collection of key value pairs. Where the key will be the properties and the values will be the values of the properties.
All right, correct. And thanks for that. So let's go ahead and actually create an array, right? We're going to let we had someone say courses. So this is how you create an array, or one of the ways to actually create an array. There's multiple ways. There's always many ways to skin a cat. So the first thing, square brackets, that's how you will notice that this is an array. Sometimes it's equals to new array and other methods, right? Those are the most common two ways of actually declaring an array in JavaScript. In other languages, this obviously might be a bit different. The syntax might be a bit different. So here, if we have courses, you can have computer science. And another thing, the separation between the elements is always by a comma. So in this case, we're creating an array of strings. I'm not going to mix the data types, even though in JavaScript, you're actually allowed to have different data types. This is still a varied array, but in most cases, your array will have the same data type across all its elements. So computer science, we have biological science, we have information technology, we have electrical engineering. Obviously, when writing courses, all first letters of a word tend to be capitalized, so I'm just following that format. And earlier, I think I missed something, so I need to go back to it. When we are declaring variables in JavaScript, we normally use the camel casing. So this is known as camel casing, whereby the first word is actually using a small case or small letter, and then every other word from there on, the first letter of the new word will have an uppercase. But there are instances whereby you have keys in your application, right? If you have keys in your application, for example, you have a backend URL, that in most cases will be written like this. So uppercases followed by the underscore. This signifies that this is actually constant, it's a constant variable that will be utilized across the whole application. So never changing, and this is normally used for keys and any other variable that is going to be constant during the life cycle of the program itself. So you're only going to see this once or twice in most programs. So this is rarely used. I know in other languages, you actually have the, I think it's called, is it the snake case? I think it's normally used in Python where it's small letters, underscore, and then the variable. So in some programs, you're going to see this, but this is very rarely used. These are the most common ways of using it. If it's a normal variable, you declare it like this using the comma casing, where let's say this variable uses comma casing. And then this is just going to be true. So this is what's called comma casing. This uses small letters. Every other word has the first letter being an uppercase. So they use uppercase, C is uppercase, C is uppercase. It makes it to be readable, just like this is also readable. For people who are more familiar with Python and are finding that to be very easy, you might find this to be actually more readable than this, but this is the most common way of writing variable names in JavaScript. So this in JavaScript is going to start falling away, even though it's actually more readable. But anyway, so as you can see, this is also using a bit of snake casing with the underscore, but then everything else is actually capitalized. So it's not really the snake casing as there. But there's other ways of actually doing it. There's also Pascal casing. But in JavaScript, we normally use this format. So when you submit your projects, this is the kind of casing we actually say we want to see being used with your variables. But anyway, back to the array. So with arrays, you actually have something called indexes. And an index always, they start at 0. right? It's a position of the element, but they start at 0 as opposed to 1, as we normally do with tables. So this will mean that computer science is at 0. This is 1, 2, 3. So this start at 0, making the last element to be at index. So the last element will be at index courses dot length minus 1. I'm sure you have seen this a lot in terms of writing logic for JavaScript, but you might not really know exactly where it's coming from. It's coming from the fact that every element is actually at that specific position. So this one is at position 1, but its index becomes 1 minus 1, making it to be at position 0. This becomes 2 minus 1, making it to be at position, at index 1, meanwhile it's at position 2, and so on and so forth. So this is at position 4. So courses.length is 4 minus 1, bringing it to 3. So that's why we usually use that when we're actually looping something that we're going to cover tomorrow. But that's what happens. So if you want to check what's happening in terms of this, if we console log, if you console log courses, so this is how you actually grab a specific item in an array. This is how you grab a specific item in an array. You use the square bracket and then you say it's 0. I'm going to remove all these other console logs. We no longer need any of this. Remove that, remove that. We save this. Not keep push. I'm looking for load index. And this is still appearing. I'm gonna take that out, CLS. And then as you can see, we have computer science. So this is how you grab a specific item. Of course, here we are pretending as if we already know what kind of element we actually want to take from it. And we also have the length property here, courses.length. This is supposed to be in a log. So console log that. Take this out, put it in there. As you can see, we now have 4. So what I was explaining is that if we want to do this, we can remove that and then put courses.length. So we just want the last item. We don't really care what item it is. We can just run courses.length minus 1, come the side, and we have our electrical engineering, and then computer science is still that first one, and then we have electrical engineering. So you can still do it from the back, obviously. And then now you have information technology. But this also has different methods, right? Right here, we're actually using the property called length, but arrays also have different methods. But before I jump into that, because I think we're going to spend the rest of today just focusing on the array itself, we are going to be looking at objects. We are going to look at objects, right? So objects are collection of key value pairs where key is the property and the value is the property value. So an object will look something like this. So we have the courses. We can actually still use the courses, but in this case, I cannot do this without nesting our information. and I just want to have one specific course at the moment. So we can say the CS course equals to that. So creating an object in JavaScript, you can still use the new object notation, just like with the arrays where you use new array, but you can also just go straight to your declaration keyword, the name of the variable, equal sign, and then you give it the squiggly brackets. So the squiggly brackets are used to open an object, but they also appear in for loops, switch statements, if statements, for loops, switch cases, if statements, and functions. But anyway, when you have it like this symbolizes an object. So what we have on the left is going to be the actual value itself. So we can say course name, and then we have computer science. So the key value pairs, as you can see, this is now highlighted in blue. Everything that will be inside the bracket that's highlighted in blue will now signify the property name or the key, and then the colon, everything after the colon is now our actual value. So our property value. So this is the key, this is the value. And then to have another key value pair, you have the comma, then you can actually say course duration. This takes 3 years. And then you can also have the APS limit. And then this is obviously different depending on whatever school you go to. Made a mistake. This is supposed to be a semicolon. So we have the course name, course duration, you have the APS limit. And then in objects, you can have strings, numbers, can also have functions, but I'm not going to do the functions. We can have arrays that are actually nested. So that would be basically modules. And then you can have that array. And then you can throw your modules in there where you have maybe mathematics. This is oversimplifying because with the mathematics, you would actually have different module numbers to it, but I'm oversimplifying this. And then you have maybe systems design, you have database design, and so on and so forth. So this is what an object looks like. Key value, course name, string, course duration being a number, APS limit is a number, modules, and then the value is actually an array. So now when we have it like this, we can manipulate all this data using code. So actually, this is supposed to be interactive. Who wants to update the course name for us? Anyone?
All right, Tabang, take it.
Hi, Mr. Bukona.
Hi.
Yes. Yes, we can create a, let me see. I can say cs.courses, cs.course.
Thanks for that. I actually forgot I'm now using CS course,
Okay.
not courses.
And then you have to use the dot notation to access the properties.
Okay.
Yes, and then you can select the course name, and then you can, okay, in equals to, and open the double quotation. and you can change it to another name. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so this is basically how you, thank you very much. This is how you access properties in an object. So as you can see up here, it's saying computer science, and then down here it is updated to information technology. So you can update the course duration as well as the APS limit. But now, what happens if we actually wanted to add? Okay, this is combining the array as well as the object. But what happens if you wanted to add an item at the end here? Does anyone want to take that?
Ulanga.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
All right, I'm gonna have a try. So you would do the same thing. So CS course dot then you call their access the array dot modules. You use the index and then add. You can use the add property.
Add property doesn't
Yeah.
exist.
You'd have to put the index signs first. Those square brackets.
Okay.
Dot add.
Square brackets dot add still doesn't exist.
Okay. Sorry, because that's how I do it in other languages. I guess it's not there in JavaScript.
Okay, anyone wants to give it a try?
Well, can you, Pretty, please give it a try? Pretty.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. At the end, you add a push dot push method, and then you push whatever you want to add at the end.
Okay, what
What
are
do
we
you want to
adding
add?
here?
Give us something to add, Pretty.
I don't know,
Look at what.
statistics.
All right.
Statistics. Okay, we've added that. Let's check out our array. Okay, and there, it's added. So that's pretty much how you can actually work with this this object, and you can also remove, right? So
We have a hand from Sendo.
yes.
All right. Your live, Sendo.
Okay, so is it possible to use what I can this thing? Indexing. Like to add a value. For example, if you want to add a value to which index? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, to the fourth index, you just say the name of the array, then the square brackets. And then you put 4, then equals 2, and then you add that value.
Tell me what value to add.
Which value? That's a mobile computing.
Right there, it has been added. So basically anything you can do to an array, you can do to the nested array. Anything that you can do to a string, you can also do to this string that belongs to CS course. So for example, if we're to I didn't mean to remove that. We have computer science that's like that. Wait a minute. We removed computer science, so I need to do this to an array. Let's have mathematics being like that. As you can see, mathematics now has that space. So what we're doing before, we can still do the side by CS course dot modules. So this is at index 0. Then we can say it's equals to CS course dot modules at index 0 dot trim. As you can see, that has now been updated, but we're essentially taking it from the string, just that we now also need to update because this side is not really doing it directly to what belongs on the CS course object. So after manipulating the string, we then need to update our initial string. So all the methods and properties that exist for your data here will still be accessible as if it was on its own, just like we had with the array. So just to answer your question, and then with the removing part, if you want to fully remove, obviously you can just remove the actual value without removing the key. But if you want to get rid of the key, you have to use the delete keyword. I know this is a bit counterintuitive because with the other ways of doing things, you are actually going straight to cscourse.course name and then doing something to it. So everything is actually being done on the right. But with the delete, you actually need to call the delete keyword and then call the object that you want to target, in this case, CS course. Then we want to remove maybe course name, right? We come here and then the course name is gone. So we now only have three keys.
Yeah.
I need to mute some people. Right. Mulanga, I see your hand is up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
What if we have like a big data set in an array and we don't know the index and basically we want to search it via the string name? How can we do that?
That's where looping now comes in. So this is something that's actually supposed to be covered tomorrow, where you're actually going to iterate through an array as well as probably a nested array.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's where the looping mechanism comes in because in that case, you don't know the specific index, but you're trying to do some conditioning or conditionals. You're actually trying to check if this equals to that and then do something else. So that's where looping actually comes in. So usually use looping to check for values in an array or object. So for those who have actually iterated through object, I know you understand what I mean here, but I just left it in brackets because the looping mechanism is normally used for arrays. So you're looping to check for values in an array while not being sure which index something is in. So that's where you loop and then you check according to your condition if something meets the criteria. If it does, you're either going to take the values from it or not. For example, if you wanted to check if computer science actually has mathematics, you'd want to loop through cscourse.modules and then check using if statements if this exists. If it does, then continue doing something else. But otherwise, it's just going to be all of this. So we have added, have we? We have updated, we have pushed. You can also add into this. So for example, if you didn't have APS limit, you can actually go ahead and add using this notation. So it currently doesn't exist, but in this case, JavaScript is going to create it for us and then assign the value that we are going to give it. So if we run this, oh, okay, it's supposed to be CS cos, not CS. So that's what that means. CS is not defined, it does not exist.
Sorry,
As you can see, no
Pule,
APS limit, and then we now have it. Yes,
sorry about
can
that.
go
Pule would
ahead.
like to come through.
Yes, you can
You're,
come in.
hi, Pule, you're live.
Am I audible?
You're audible.
Mr. Vugon,
Yes.
I happened to see something when you were declaring the array, which in my mind it came to my mind that okay, it's similar to an array list since I have a background of of Java. So then I happened to see you using the dot push, which in my background knowledge is that in Java we have different types of data structures, and push is a method which we use it on a stack. So my question is that in JavaScript, if you're declaring there's no different types of arrays. Let me say it like that. There's no different types of arrays other than this one which you've declared now, and maybe something as single array and double array.
Um,
You understand my question?
if I
Yeah.
understand your question, um, so with push, it's basically your add, right? In Java.
Yes, yes, yes. For array list,
And
for array list only. For array list only.
for array lists, just that in
Yes.
JavaScript, your array list to us is basically an array. What you would do with array list is basically what we would do with array. So
Okay.
dot add is the same as dot push. So in terms of you saying single or double array, I'm not sure if you're talking about dimensional arrays.
I think maybe it is. It's 3D and 2D arrays. Thank you.
Okay, so what we have here is a 2D array. If you wanted to create a 3D array, you would actually have something like this. And then inside you have another array, maybe 0, 1, 3, and so on and so forth. So with a matrix, this is going to be okay, 3. So the declaration of the array is still the same. It's up to you as a developer to actually tell it how it's going to be structured. So in JavaScript is a very problematic language because of how it operates. That's why some developers actually make jokes about it. They say it's unfriendly and all of that because when it comes to things like this, like you're saying, you actually have to do it yourself. You're creating it from scratch. Some languages might support out of the box where everything is already said to actually work like this. But here, all arrays are created the same. You don't even specify the length. You just go straight to actually giving it values.
Okay. S- so this type of array, the CS calls, does that replaces any type of array which I know? Because I've seen you using the push method, as I said, which is we use it on different array on Java. So I want to know if this when you declare an array like this, does it replaces all the arrays that I know, or there's a different array which we are still coming to know about it, other than the two types of arrays which you've showed us now?
No, it's basically meshed into one. So the way you'd use different arrays, lists in Java out of the box, this side it's replaced by the array. Then if you want different structures, that's where you now need to jump into writing your own data structure, which is where I left it here, where you now can make it work the same way it does in Java, where you're actually using you're creating your own methods essentially. So you can actually use .add instead of .push. But out of the box, JavaScript only has one array. There's also another one called set, but set is not necessarily an array. It just allows you to be able to remove duplicates in an array the simpler way. So you can actually remove duplicates in an array using a set. So a set is also just a list of items. So if you have, let's say we have numbers, right? Let's say we have numbers like this. Numbers equals to, and then you have maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 7, 9, 10, 23, 12, 10, 2, 4, 3, 10. You can use a set to remove all the duplicates, but then you might also need to bring it back to actually being an array because they don't actually work 100% the same. So to work with lists, we have arrays and then we also have sets.
Okay.
But then it's very rare for you to actually run into a use case where you can use a set. So sets are used for removing duplicates in an array.
Thank you.
We have a hand up from Ezra.
Yes, Ezra?
Morning. Yeah, so I have two questions about the arrays. So I want to know if like the array in JavaScript can it hold mixed data types, and also if an array can consist of object. You see on the course array, the one that you declared at the top there, if
What
it
is it?
can I mean like check up there on the yes on the courses array. So can it consist of objects as its elements inside instead of just computer sciences? Yeah.
Okay, yes. So JavaScript is not very controlling compared to other languages, right? I know in Java you cannot have mixed, unless if you create your own data structure, then you can actually do that. But then because you actually need to specify the data type of a variable before you actually give it values, you are saying int array list equals 2, then you actually create the array itself. Obviously, it's expecting all elements to be integers, but in JavaScript, you can have an array like this. So you can have an array which is number, string. So here we can say v, can have an object. In the object, you can say name, and then we have v again. This needs to be a string. We have v again, and can have surname, Nisi. We can still have other data types like undefined. Okay, so this doesn't make sense anymore. Let me do this properly so it's readable. You can have undefined, you can have another array inside. So you can say 3, 4. Okay, and then I typed 5. Wow. My brain and my hands are not communicating properly. If we run this, as you can see, it's a valid array. No issues running.
Okay, I think.
So JavaScript
One,
does allow us to actually have different data types. Yes, Lozi?
one last time, Mulanga.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was asking, I know it's not in the scope of our syllabus today, but you did mention it, like how in JavaScript would have to actually do the back end stuff a lot by ourselves, like for checking the format of our passwords and usernames. I just wanted to ask, when you use Firebase, is that not the same case, or does Firebase have properties where it checks itself for authentication?
Sometimes it does clean, but with the spaces, it might actually just leave you hanging because it's more focused with Firebase authentication. Like there's different services with Firebase. There's authentication, there's the database, there's real time, which was the first one that they introduced, which was just using JSON objects. So basically the whole database would look like this. If you had more keys, there would actually be nested objects and so on and so forth. But it was actually just an object that was a whole database. So you'd actually need to reference the entry point of your data as CS cost, if maybe that's a project you're working on, then call cost name, maybe cost CS cost of modules, where so another database called Firestore. For authentication, most things are actually handled for you. Like it does the password hashing, you don't have to worry about that. But in terms of the data that you type, you might actually still need to clean it up yourself because it's just going to take whatever you type into it. So if your password has spaces and you know passwords shouldn't have spaces, it might just take that into the database and then that will become the actual password for the user. Meanwhile, it was a mistake. So everything can be handled for you by Firebase, but then you still need to work with it by cleaning your own data.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Fukona, could you kindly please push for them to GitHub, just to show them a bit how we're done. We do it after doing so much lovely work.
Wait, I already pushed to GitHub.
I mean, like, commit your latest changes, just to show them the add commit.
All right, again, let's go get status. As you can see, so like I said, get status is just telling you what files have actually been added to the staging area and what has not been added. So I can use git add file name .jx or the period. So the period is just going to select all the files in this folder, which is the tutorial folder. So whatever exists in there is going to be added. So we git add that. I think there's something that I forgot to mention. Let's go to our file. When working with GitHub, because I saw this during the what is this? During the Node, while I was actually going through the assessments for Node. You need to use git ignore in some cases. When you are using Node to create a project, it doesn't select which folders to actually ignore for you. So when you have a node modules folder, you actually need to tell it to not send this to GitHub. Most of you actually send node modules, but you need to tell it to ignore by using this guy. So in the .git ignore file, you just specify, so this is a folder, you just specify the folder or the file. Anything that's nested here will actually be ignored. If I'm going to create a new folder called node modules, for example, and then create a file in there. This can be script.js and then console log whatever in here. If I come this side and type git status, as you can see, it says use git to include git add file to include that, but I can git add all. If I did it properly, this should actually be ignored, unless if I didn't. Let's run git status again. Okay, I made a mistake. Lozi, can you correct me on the syntax for the dot git ignore? Missing something here.
All right. Let's see.
I'm missing something crucial.
Dum, da, da, dum, 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 dum.
This is correct. Oh, never mind, never mind.
Is it a forward
Of
slash something?
No, 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 no. I focused on the wrong thing. Yes, the git ignore file is added, but it ignored the node module. Sorry about that, guys. So I think I need a long break. I'm losing focus. So the .git ignore will also be sent to GitHub, but then this folder will actually be ignored, just as this is actually stating. Thought I made a mistake, but I was reading the .git ignore file instead. So that is added, we git commit, added, what did I add? Added arrays and objects. So remember when you're actually commenting, whatever it is that you're doing also needs to make sense, because in most cases, this is going to be used to revert if you ever make a mistake. You're going to use this commit to actually double check where your code broke. And this is also going to be useful for when you're working with team members. This is where they're going to check what exactly you're working on. For example, if there's any code revisions that a team member needs to do before they accept your commits. This is what they're going to be looking at. Oh, Vukona was adding arrays and objects. Okay, let's go ahead and actually check what's happening over there. And there's another one that you can actually do. This can be an overview of what's happening. But if you use another second dash, so that becomes the comment. This will become the comment. Then this becomes the actual message. The message can be longer than the comment. So you can actually be more specific here to say added arrays with array methods, removing elements, etc. Add that, and then we get push. And then we go back to this side. We need to refresh because it doesn't automatically refresh as there are changes. And then we go to our commit. And then we go to this one. As you can see, our comment is at the top and then our message is at the bottom. Meanwhile, with the other one, it only has a comment with no message. So if you want to be a bit more specific, the comment itself can have minimal word usage. Meanwhile, the other one can even be a paragraph if your team likes reading. And then down here, it actually shows you what changed. Let's go back to the other commit. As you can see, it shows what's happening. Node modules is under the git ignore, so this is being ignored. And as you can see, I only have the git ignore as well as the index file. The folder is not there. And then it shows you what has changed. So this is how you know you need to revert on something if there's a mistake that was made. This is how it's going to look. And then there's something called match conflicts also. Match conflicts will look like this, but depending on your settings, this match conflict will appear in VS Code or they'll appear in your terminal where you're trying to push they'll appear as, what is this? I forgot which terminal that it actually uses, but it will appear in your terminal and you actually need to use commands in order to move through the file. But then they'll also be highlighted like this to show you which line has been changed and which line you make changes to. Then you actually need to accept whatever change you want to commit. But with those, you are still going to have class sessions around them if you'll be with us during Code Tribe. Going back to this, working on the arrays, I'm going to remove this, obviously. I do not need that. I'm going to clear the terminal. And then with the dot push, I don't think I explained fully. The dot push is the Java equivalent in JavaScript. It adds element, but to the end of the array. So if we have 4 items, this will become the 5th item. And then with this one, it allows us to use the square notation to actually specify where we want to add items. Obviously, if there's already an item in that index, it's going to override. And then with this, we're basically updating. So this and this are more or less the same. Just like with this one, there was no element at index 4. So it was adding. Meanwhile, with this one, it's actually overriding after we've done manipulating. So this is basically it when it comes to objects. This is all that you need to know. There's someone who asked about checking for something. Obviously, that is going to come tomorrow when we do the looping and the conditions. But this is basically it. You just need to know that with the dot notation, it allows you to access a property. And when you specify the property, you get back the value. If it does not exist, or if it exists, if you specify the property, it's going to allow you to set or override whatever has already been set in that object. And if you have nested data, you can actually continue using this. And as much as we might not focus on objects during, well, this type of objects during the refresher course, which is the sessions that we're currently having right now, or one of the sessions is today, you will also need to know how to work with nested objects. So in some cases, you have an object that has an array. Inside that array, you have other objects which also have arrays. So you find yourself working with something like CS course dot maybe data dot array dot not dot, but at index 0. And then there's also something like this, CS course dot data dot array at index 0, maybe dot then more data. Obviously, this data does not exist, but I'm just showing you that in most of our cases, when working with live projects, you find that you actually need to understand how this works, as well as when it's now nested, where we have second nested arrays. And then you need to actually specify. And then you find that you also need to write conditions whereby you're actually iterating through this array, checking for the more data, and after running through that more data, you also want to check in a specific second nested array. So this becomes a nightmare, but then it's actually something that's really applicable when you're actually working with real data. So as much as this is simplified, you also need to know how to work with it on the other side when everything is becoming nested. So now that we're done with the object, we are going to take our array. Actually, are we using courses? We're using courses over there, and then that's pretty much it. Okay, so I can cut courses at the top here and bring it down here. So obviously, we have different array methods, just like we do with the string. To add an item, I think there was someone who was asking if there's a difference in this as well as when everything is out in the open like this. They're pretty much the same. So whatever is applicable to this is applicable to this. Whatever is applicable to this is applicable to that array. So if we wanted to add an item, we use dot push in the object. We can actually do the same thing here. So we have computer science, biology, electrical engineering. We can have mechanical engineering. And then we can console log our courses. Okay, this is not console logged. That's good because I do not want this running all over the place. As you can see, that is added to the last part. What happens if you want to remove a value from an array without sizing down? So we have 5 elements. So you still want it to have 5 elements, but you just want to remove the actual word.
Sorry,
Well,
there's a question from Musa.
yes.
Come through, Musa.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
We can hear
Yes, I
you.
can hear you.
Okay, so there was this code that you wrote like a minute ago, where for like you put like an object within the array. So I've noticed that that object didn't have a name. So I was just asking like, how is one gonna be able to make use of the object's data in a way if it is within that array?
Okay. Wait, are you talking about the one that was down here or the one that I wrote somewhere up here?
It was down there. You even rubbed it off. Yeah.
Let me see if it's still here. Are you talking about this one?
Um,
I think so.
yeah, that one. That one.
Okay, that's a simple one. This is an array. So to access this
Yeah.
object, you'd actually need to call array at index 2. So let me take this back and then you will see. That's a simple array in an an object in an array. Let me take this
Okay.
out. So let me bring it back. And then if we console log array at index 0, 1, 2, as you can see, we have that object.
Okay. So if we want to retrieve the name of the of within that object, we're just gonna say dot name, and then it's gonna give us the name.
Yes, just simply like
Okay,
that.
man. Okay. No, thank you.
My pleasure. So I'm going to take this out again, but it's online. But I'm going to override that code anyway. But I think you get the gist of it. So here we have courses. What was I doing? Okay. We push. Yes. Lozi, you are cutting. I think your
Do
network
you
is
want to take?
unstable at the moment.
Do you want to take one last one from Togozani before?
Yes, I can
Vukana?
take.
Would you
Yes,
like
I
to
can take
take
one.
one last one from Nelson, and then maybe that break? Can you hear
Yes, you
me now?
can. Yes, I can hear you.
Nelson, please come through and then so that you can just So after Nelson, you let us know. Nelson, please come through.
Hi, can you hear me?
You are loud and clear.
My question was, how are we going to capture the user information? Are we going to use HTML, or when using JavaScript, we can capture user information? For example, I want the user to enter their age. So how are we going
Oh,
to do it?
Good question. So in this session, we're just focusing on JavaScript, right? There's no HTML, so there's no front end whatsoever. There's nothing for us to run on. That's why we're even running it on the terminal. So essentially, this is actually running like a script. So I'm sure you guys know what a script is. A script is just something that you can actually run. JavaScript is also a script. It runs on the web, but Node allows us to run it locally. So the same way you have your VB script, which installs your viruses on your PCs, as well as what is the other one? On Linux or Mac, you have your bash script. That's basically what we're kind of doing here. There's no UI. But if you want to have a UI, then that's where you would start involving your front-end technologies like HTML and CSS, or a framework like Angular or React. Are you answered?
So you are saying when using JavaScript, we can allow the user to enter. That's what you are saying.
With JavaScript alone, you can, but then now you'd actually have to use the terminal because we are running the program through the terminal. We are essentially running it like a script instead of an actual website language in this case. So if you want to accept user input, you'd actually need to write a terminal script whereby it allows inputs from the terminal in how we're running it. Or you can embed it into an HTML file like we're doing in the first session. So if you have your HTML that's connected to JavaScript, then JavaScript can handle the data that's coming from the HTML side.
Okay, thank you. Then last question, are there any imports when using JavaScript? Some things of which we have to import like that.
That's a yes and no answer, right? If you're using plain JavaScript, you don't need to make any imports if you're going to write everything yourself, because all imports are just making it easy for you to access something that JavaScript already has. But if you're going to be using libraries and frameworks, in most cases, you run into cases where you need to use imports because they make your life easier. Even though you don't have to, because you can write everything yourself, but the imports makes sure that you only focus on what you really need to do. There are imports that allow you to deal with validation, so they handle all the validation. All you have to say is these are the requirements in terms of validation. It should not be empty. It should be a valid email format, and you pass it to that a module that you would have imported, and it handles everything for you. Then it returns whether that data is valid or not. But then you can still do that yourself. But then that's where now regex comes in. And regex can be a nightmare also if you're just starting out.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, my pleasure.
All right, Mukona, do you want to take that break, or you want to do one last one?
I think we can continue. We are towards 12 o'clock, and I think I might not actually be able to. I don't think I'll be able to go to the office. I'll be late for that session. But anyway, let's just finish before we take a break.
Kilo wants to know if you can push two things at the same time, like push chemistry and physics. Um, yeah, let's
So
see.
we have electrical, we have mechanical, let's have chemical engineering.
Kilo, do you want to pull through and help us with the question? Your volume is very low. We can hear you, but you're very, 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 very low.
How about now?
Perfect.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to know. What you wrote on line 91.
can you like push multiple elements into an array at the same time?
Yes, with push, you are unlimited in terms of how many elements you want to add. So as you can see here, I did it for you, and it now has mechanical, electrical, as well as chemical. So our last element was electrical, and then we added mechanical and chemical using one push method.
Okay, thank you.
So it can be limitless. You can even have 100 items.
Togozani Shabalala, was your question answered? Togozani?
Hello, can
Hi,
you
we
hear
can
me?
hear you. Yes, we can hear you now.
No, I don't think so. I asked if Vokoda declared this array twice, the courses array now, because he declared it at the top in the beginning. I'm not
Oh,
sure if he did it again or if he brought it or if he just brought it down to the bottom.
I just brought it down because I didn't want to remove the object and all the things that I did on the object. So I just brought it down from the top.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. No problem. Thank you. I was a little bit confused there.
No, that's understandable. I think I moved a bit too fast when I did that.
All right, there's no
Okay.
more questions.
All right, thank you, Lozi. So if you want to remove the actual element without necessarily shifting the element in the array, you can use this notation where you target that specific element index and then you just set it to an empty string, just like I did here. But then the rest of the elements are still in the respective indexes. But then you also have this method. So you can call courses.splice, right? And then you can call 0, and then the number of indexes that you want to count. So how many elements, basically 0, specify the index you want to target, and then how many elements do you want to target? In this case, we can just say 1. If we come here, we can do this. As you can see, mathematics is now out. Non-mathematics, computer science is now out, and we now have 5 compared to the 6. But you're not limited in terms of the number of elements here, so you can remove 3 in one go. And you have all of this. Right. And then, if I'm not mistaken, removed L is standing for remove elements, by the way. We do that. And then remove L. I'm going to put this in object notation. Let's come this side. As you can see. So this notation, I love using this notation a lot, but only when working on the web, not when using backend or Node because it becomes unreadable. But on the web, this indents everything properly. It's nicer to read. But what this does is it's turning this variable into an object by using the quotations. So there's curly, not quotations, the curly braces. It's essentially turning this into removed L, removed L. So this becomes the property key, this becomes the value. As you can see, the key and then the array becomes a value. So you can write it like this. It still does remove from the original array, but if you want to manipulate the elements you just removed to do some logic with them before you actually do discard, then you would want to use this notation where you say const removed items or spliced items equals to courses.splice, then whatever you put in here, this allows you to have access to the removed elements, just like we have access to them right here. So how often do I use this? Rarely, but it's something that everyone actually needs to know how to work with. If ever there is a case or use case that you actually need to make use of this notation. So instead of just throwing them away, you want to store them somewhere else. And then the other thing that we did on the other array, obviously, was to set, so we can override. In this case, I'm not sure what the fourth element is going to be, but we can override by having, I'm just going to, what do you call it? There's family law, there's custom law, and
We
all
have
of those
two
different.
hands up. Do you want to take it now?
Yes, please.
All right. Okay.
This is supposed to come to bottom.
Mapule, please come through. Pule, sorry.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Mr. Vugan.
Yes.
I see that.
We lost you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you
Yes.
now.
On line 95, you said const remove elements, right? So my
Mhm.
question is that remove element a special name or a predefined name?
No. You can
Okay,
call
it's a
it whatever
variable.
you want.
Or it's a
Yeah, it's a
variable.
variable.
Okay, now let's go back. When we started, you mentioned, remember when we started, you asked us about variables and stuff. You declared you declared something. You said something about constant. It's a something that doesn't change and it should be in caps in line number 14. Line number 14.
Okay, this one I said it's rarely used and it's mostly for variables. So if you have, oh, I still need to cover functions, forgot about that. So if you have a variable that is not going to change, right? You'll
Yeah.
find that you already know the actual key. So in this case, let's say it's an API key. Usually just a jumble of characters and it looks like
Yeah.
something like this, right? So it's never going to change. It's hard-coded more or less. And then in this case, this format is normally used for variables that, in a sense, they can change. Example is, I hope I don't throw you off, but let's say we have a function sum, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm using two different function code
So, my
syntax.
question is, are we supposed to declare it in caps or small caps
That's what I'm
on
trying to
const?
answer.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to answer. Just give me a second. We'll come back to the functions. It's something that I still need to cover before we end the session. So something like this, right? So this, you find it when it's a key, or for example, let's say you have what is this? You're working on the back end. I hope I'm not losing people when I say the back end, but basically, if you have a mobile app, that becomes your front end, and then all the data is handled on a server somewhere, right? So that becomes the back end. You have different database keys, you have maybe APIs that you're making calls to, all that data. You already know that this is never going to change ever. Or if you're ever going to change, you actually have to kind of hard code it. That is when this is normally used, right? But then when it comes to constant variables that are actually used in functions, you'll find them being like this. And then these are nested inside blocks of code. Meanwhile, this one will be on the high level. So usually this will be in your entry files. that's when you'll come across this kind of syntax where all the variables that your APIs, your databases are using, your username, if you're using a database, you know you need your username, you need your password. Then in most cases, they'll use this syntax where they say database username equals to maybe Vukonamnisi, database password equals to 543. And then it uses this syntax. But then when it comes to constant variables that are block scoped, then they'll be written in small letters. That's why I put the rarely used in the other one, which I was using all caps on.
Okay, so for the small letters one, it's for blocked scope only.
Okay, so this is what's called industry standards. You can still use it, your code won't break. But then imagine reading a code base where you have something written like this, right? And then return some. You see, it already seems a bit weird, right?
Yeah.
But then this one kind of falls into place. So imagine you have constant variables all through this function, and all of them are caps. They end up diminishing the readability of the variables. Meanwhile, with the ones that are uppercase, we all know that whatever page is trying to use that specific variable, we know that this is actually coming from somewhere else. It was imported from a different file. So it signifies that. And wherever you see capitals actually being used, then you know that, okay, so this variable is actually not local to this specific file or to this specific function. This is a global variable that's used almost everywhere else.
Okay.
Are you with me?
Yeah, I'm with you. So, hey.
No, don't worry. Like your code still won't break, but then these are
Okay, I
some
want
of
to
the
know.
good practices that you run into when you're working with JavaScript.
Okay, let me ask you this. If
One
okay,
last
since
question.
since you use the constant removed items, right? Is it because you use the reason you used constant instead of let, is it because maybe you wanna utilize the amount of removed items somewhere else?
In this example, I didn't really think about the future. I was just declaring for the sake of declaring, just to show you that when you're using splice, you actually have access to those items. But then since I did it like this, it becomes a constant. But then you can still use a let on this one because I was just showing you on that one. Don't mind the actual keyword that I used. I was showcasing the fact that splice returns values for you to actually continue using for whatever you want to do.
Okay, thank you.
My
All
pleasure.
right. Matube, please come through.
Okay, so on line number 95 on the removed items, say the variable, I mean the type is const, not let. The type that is not the other type. I mean it's const, not let. So if now I want to come back and just remove more items, is it safe to increment on top of the removed items, or I have to just have another variable?
On the removed items or on the original? Because remember, with the removed items, this is taking into account if you want to do some computation, maybe you want to store this on an array, or you want to show the user that you just removed these items, for example, right? But then this one remains with the elements it still has. So this one, you use whatever, and then you're probably going to discard the items after.
Okay,
So the
oh,
elements you should add still should be added to the courses themselves.
No, I just mean on the removed items. If now I want to just remove more items, say now we remove 3 items, then I want to come back later to just remove one more item. Should I just go to the removed and increment the removed items with that one more cause I want to remove?
No, you still need to run this. So in that case, since we already have removed items, you might want to, let me see. Let's say we didn't delete anything, right? Then removed items will be equals to removed items and then courses dot splice and then maybe 0 and then 1. So this is strictly for objects and arrays. What this does is it essentially removes the elements away from the array, but they'll still be comma separated. So here we're creating a new array. We're essentially creating a new array and then copying the items from the original array, this original array, and then adding the items that we'll have taken out yet again. So that in a sense, we are actually adding the last item to the removed items. But because if we do it with just an equal sign and courses.splice, it will just be the last item we just removed.
Okay, so it will replace.
Yes, so in this case, we're actually replacing. But first we make a copy of the removed items and then put them into the new array and then also grabbing the removed item.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
My pleasure. So we have sum and then we have sum, right? Think now I need to cover the functions because we're focused a lot on arrays, we have removed items, we have targeted the specific index. But before I go straight to this function and explain what's happening, with our initial, just give me a second. Okay, sorry about that. So if you do this indentation, it's advisable to check what index we are currently on. In this case, we just went straight to adding at index 4, family law, and then see what happens. It now says we have an empty item, and then it says family law. That's because we only had 3 items, and then we're trying to push to that. So if you're using it this way, always take into consideration what is the last element that we have. So in this case, it would be better to just say courses dot length and then -1. This would be a bit better if you don't want to use the dot push notation. This is actually going to work. And wait a minute. This is also supposed to use that notation. So see, with that notation, I'd forgotten this part because this is going to return an array. That's why we now have that nested array. So this should be like this instead for everything to be in one array. So now I have 4 elements. So we took 1, 2, 3 out, and then we took another one out, which was now the first element. Then we added 2 more, which was with that. So I hope that is covered, and then we can move. So we have added, we have removed, and then we're fully removed. So this was just replacing with an empty string. We're fully removed, we have returned, so we can actually utilize our removed items. We've added to the end. We've also added to the end using push. Wait a minute. Okay, I think I removed some of that code. We have added using push, and we're able to grab specific items that we wanted, which I console out before, which we use that notation. Wait a minute. Do we still have courses here, or is everything removed? Wait a minute. There's nothing in our... that's why it was acting weird. So this essentially removes all the elements that we had. So at 0, we only have family law, and then courses, we have that. I was surprised what was happening. 0, and then we have family law being returned. I think we are done with arrays. We are going to cover how to loop through arrays and do conditionals tomorrow on a specific array, but let's go to functions. So functions allow us to actually, functions are blocks of code that allow us to separate consents. And essentially one function, if you want to write clean code, then one function should be aimed at towards doing one specific thing, so to achieve one goal. So all the lines of code in a function, lines of code work together. They work together to accomplish recommendably one specific task. Of course, you can have a function that does more than one thing, but if you want clean code that is readable to you, maintainable, and something that can actually be clear to everyone who's working on the same code base, then if it's only doing one task, then that makes it perfect. And there's two ways of creating functions. You can use the function keyword, and you can use arrow functions. So the arrow functions are ES5 plus syntax. And this is where you have a function being like this. So I can say const add numbers equals to braces. So this is the first part that we know that this is actually going to be a function. And then we actually have that block of code down here. Meanwhile, with this, it's using the function keyword, the name of the function, followed by the curly braces. Not followed by the curly braces, but the normal braces, followed by the curly braces. So functions, this is the syntax that you have. And then here we can have const sum again. And then we can say 5 plus 9. And then we can return that. We can return sum. So as you can see, equal sign. As you can see, this is adding and then returning. This is adding and returning. But not all functions return a value. So functions can return values to the calling block of code, to the calling code. And then how do you actually call a function? Well, I'm going to have this in the console log because our functions are returning something, but you call a function by writing the name of the function and having your normal bracket. So I'm going to remove the console logs that we have this side. No longer needed. We'll save this. CLS to clear our, and then we have 8. So we have called that function. But then what happens if we have a function that does not return anything? So let's just say this is going to be console string. So this is just to console a string. This is just to console log, not console string. I do not want to have recursive functions. So here we're just going to say hello world. So we can remove that and then call our console string. Actually, this is not going to return anything. As you can see, the console log is saying undefined because it's not returning anything, but the hello world is still showing up. So this means that you can actually even have this outside of a console log and it should still run perfectly well. As you can see, that has run and this has run. So that's one way to actually have your functions, right? But in most cases, functions are actually going to be accepting values because we want to write clean code. If we're adding numbers, we want the numbers to be dynamic. So we can have A plus B, and then we return the sum to the calling code. Therefore, you can have const sum. So remember what I was saying in terms of the block scoped code. You can see I have sum, and I still have sum this side. So sum equals to get sum. Nope, that's not the one I want. I want add numbers where I actually declared A plus B. We can have that. Obviously, we already have const sum. So this is now going to be second sum because we cannot reuse sum because we already have it up there. So this is going to be 90 and 50. And then we can console log those down here. Sum and second sum. And let's see what that gives us. We have 14 and 140. So this is clean because we don't keep on reusing the same line of code. I mean, we can just go to say const sum equals to 5 plus 9, const second sum equals to 90 plus 50. But then now we're rewriting the same block of code, same lines of code, meaning that it's even easier for us to actually introduce an error. For example, I can have 5 plus 9 and make a mistake, probably instead of being a plus, I end up having this being a minus. Mistakes are easy to make, right? It can be a minus. This side, if I make a mistake, it can be 90. Find myself maybe right now, let's say I'm exhausted, but I'm still writing my code, ends up being 90 divided by 50. So we now essentially have two bugs, but this is supposed to be a sum, this is supposed to be a second sum. What happens in this case? Well, now I have to come to this line, debug, come to this line, debug. Becomes problematic. But then when you have a function that you always know the output of, then it becomes easy to just say that, okay, I have a function that I add numbers on. So let me just use that function. If there's any error that is going to occur, guess what? I already know that this is probably the error, right? So both this, if they give me something I do not expect, -4, and then I have 40. But 5 plus 9 is not 9 minus 4. 90 plus 50 is not supposed to be 40. This is actually supposed to be higher than 100. What's happening? Well, what do they have in common? Add numbers function. Oh, there it is. Obviously, this is a simplistic view of looking at functions, but then in most functions, you find that you have these lines of code. And then line 137 and line 138 all want the value at the end. So whatever calculations you're doing here are going to be applied to both values. Doesn't really make sense to keep on rewriting. How many lines? That's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Plus minus 14 lines of code. You keep on rewriting the same thing. Why not just create a block of code that you can actually reuse? Because this actually makes it reusable. This, something I forgot, reusable blocks of code that allow us to separate concerns. And you always know that if you're adding numbers, it's always going to be a sum. Don't need to rewrite. So you can actually just keep on reusing that blocks of code for as long as you're looking for the sum between two numbers. Obviously, you can also make this a bit more dynamic by making use of arrays, but because that's not what we're doing right now, I cannot use loops because I haven't introduced those. But you can also have an array of different elements. Obviously, you can start off with 90 elements, have one that's only 2 elements. One can also have 1 element. And then in the sum, you are looping through all those elements. You declare a variable at the top, looping through those elements. And then with every iteration, adding to the sum, and then you return the total value. So this can also be limitless number of arguments. So that's the nice part about working with functions. You don't have to keep on writing the same line of code. But then, I think I am going to stop right here in terms of looking at the functions, but there's also more things that you can actually do with functions. I remember talking about high order functions. We are running out of time, so unfortunately, I cannot really touch on this. But high order functions are functions that either return or accept another function, another function as an argument or the return value. So we also work with high order functions quite a lot when working with real life data, like when you have your promises. We also have something called a callback. What is a callback? This is a function that is sent as an argument to another function. So already you can see the relationship between 1 and 2. So I think for today, this is where I end. I looked at a simplistic view of how to work with functions. You can have your return value. In this case, we're just adding. There's more things that you can do, obviously, but looking at the time, we're already running over. And you can reuse functions everywhere, just like we did here to assign to two different variables called sum and second sum. So I think this is where I end. Tomorrow, hopefully, we'll be focusing on how to loop through arrays. So we're going to continue from here. It's not going to be me being in charge of the session though, but we're going to look at how to loop through arrays, write conditional statements, combining them with our loops, as well as looking at conditionals as as in if statements. Today we did look at conditionals, but it was very limited. Do I still have it here? Okay, I did take it out, but this was actually a simplistic way of looking at conditionals because we are checking if a condition is met, if this actually does match that. But tomorrow we'll be looking at things like if statements. So looking at the condition and then doing something else with it, if a condition is met or when it's not met. So I think this is where I close it. Do we have any questions? Okay, we already have one in the chat. For what you're asking me, I think I need to let all the elements in the array remain because we shouldn't be removing. So I'm going to take this out. And then, no, where are you? So the courses, right? Someone is asking for me to use includes to check if a value exists. So we have family law, biological science. If you want to check if a value exists, obviously you can use an if statement for this. Looping through, use an if statement to check while you're iterating. But there's a simple way to do it. Like suggested, you can actually use the includes method. And then let's say family law. This is actually supposed to be in a console log because, okay, this is supposed to be paste because this is going to return either true or false. So there we go. That is true. It exists. So let's say FL exists, and then that becomes the answer. It does exist. So FL exists equals to true. So that was a comment that we had from Nyakalo. Yes, do you guys have any questions before I bid you goodbye? Yes, you can speak, Katlaho.
I wanted to know the difference between the delete method and the pop method on the array. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So in normal cases, I use the delete method for objects. So with the pop, I know it removes the last item. So if we have courses right here, the last item is electrical engineering, right? If we use courses.pop, this should remove the last item. So let's have another console log. Actually, let me just copy that. I'm lazy to type. So let's have that. As you can see, it removed the last item. But I've never used the delete on the arrays. So let us see if this actually works, right? Courses at index, we have 0, 1, 2. I'm wondering if this also works. So let's go ahead. This actually needs to be on top. So you see that that becomes a difference. So the item still exists in a sense because it has an empty item instead of actually removing it fully compared to
Okay,
pop.
I think I get that one. Is the same as pop is the same as shift, but shift is just removing the first item and pop is removing the last item of the array.
Yes. And then with
Alright.
delete, if you're going to use delete, it removes from whatever index you'll have specified, but it leaves this as a trace.
It leaves the index. The index is the value is removed, but the index is there with
Yes.
delete. Is it?
Yes.
All right. I think now I'm clear on the math.
All right. Thank you for the question. So that was Katleho. Katleho, you are Pole. Do you have a question? Who else has their hands up? Okay, so we have 3 people with their hands up. I've unmuted you guys so you guys can speak.
Sir, is it
Hello,
possible
sir.
for you to get
Senzo, just wait.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, but I forgot your name, but it's showing as Samsung. So you can
It's
speak,
Nelson.
please. Oh, yes, Nelson, you can speak.
sir, is it possible for you to share the code on the chat so that we can try something out?
Yes, I can share the
Also with
repo.
those comments, also with those comments for GitHub.
What do you mean with comments for GitHub? Do you want a cheat sheet?
Yeah, so, something like that.
Okay. No problem. I think before we call it, Senzo, you had a question, you can come in.
Okay, sir. I wanted to ask, is this session recorded?
I am not sure. Lozi,
Hello?
is it being recorded? Oh, it stopped recording. Can you hear me, Senzo?
I can hear you, sir.
Yeah, it stopped recording. The first 1 hour, 30 minutes were recorded, I believe, around the 1 hour mark was recorded. But the rest of the session, I think there was an error, then it stopped.
Okay, so like where can I find the recording?
We'll share that with you guys.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Hi.
Remember when we discussed about the constant for removed items?
Yes.
Okay. I wanna refer back to that a little bit. So, the splice method, it returns an array, right?
Yes, it returns an array.
Okay. So, since it's a constant, I want you to try to use uh to push something or pop something.
Okay. The weird thing about constant values, if they are in an array, you can still pop. Let us see if this works. But with popping and adding on an array, you still actually do have access to that.
But now it
Yes,
becomes
this.
a little bit confusing to me because a constant it's permanent. It doesn't change. So how is it allowing you to add to that array, whereas it's supposed to deny you the access to add or remove an item since it's a constant? It's permanent, it's not supposed to change.
Yes, just wait. It's not supposed to, but remember when I said that JavaScript can be a little bit weird in terms of handling what's happening in its ecosystem.
Hey, someone's mic.
So
Yes.
let me mute this person. Yeah. Senzo, can you mute your mic? Because unfortunately I cannot mute you. Okay. So JavaScript is a bit weird. Sorry about that. I could not hear myself think. JavaScript is a bit weird when it comes to arrays, because what it's stopping you from doing is it won't allow you to reassign, but then these other methods can still be applicable. So in a sense, it's protecting the data type. So since you already declared it as an array, you won't be able to change it to a different data type. Meanwhile, with let is a bit weird. You can declare something as an array and then reassign it to a different data type. So if you want a string or a number, but then when it's protected with const, it stops you from being able to change this from being an array. So it'll still be an array, but then you can still manipulate the items in the array. Like here, you saw before when I was splicing, the second time I was splicing, it gave me this error, right? Assignment to constant variable. But then it still allows me to pop.
Okay, say basically what you mean is that let's just we spliced three elements inside the array. Is it three, right?
Yeah, but remember this is coming from this, right?
Yes.
So this
I
still
just
counts as the initialization.
I just wanna go with you step by step. Since we spliced three elements in the array, right? What you
Yes.
said, we cannot reassign the variables, right?
Yes.
So what do you mean the removed item is the variable, right?
Yes.
Okay, sharp. And then the elements inside, when you mean reassigning, the elements inside, they are strings. If we change them to characters or numbers, it won't allow us. Is that what you mean?
It should allow us.
Sorry.
Let us see.
Now,
What?
now. Ish.
It's not me, it's JavaScript, all right? JavaScript is...
Okay. You said
Let me
reassigning,
see.
you don't allow us to reassign. And
let us see.
Removed items is the variable. The element, it's what it's being initialized to.
Wait. I get your question, eh?
Yes.
Let us see removed items. So let's console log this. And I do understand. What is your background?
I mean background language that I know.
Yes. Which language are you comfortable with?
Java.
Okay. In JavaScript is a weird language, right? As you can
Yes.
see now, where's removed items? I was able to update this item on index 0 by reassigning the element itself. I can manipulate, but then I cannot change the actual array. So if now I want to say array equals to this is going to give me an error because I'm now trying to update. So it protects the data type of the array, but then whatever I want to do in the array elements, I have free will.
Okay, so basically what you did there, meaning you cannot override the whole array into a different array.
Yes, but
you can
removing...
change each element within the array.
Yes.
And you can add more items inside the array.
Yes. So it becomes useful for, let's say in your function, you know that whatever data type is always going to be an array, right?
Yes.
Obviously, data types you're trying to protect so that you don't magically change, because in JavaScript, they are not as protected as in Java, whereby your array, you already set it to be array of int. if you're trying to change it, it's going to ask you to do some magical stuff, right? In
Yes.
JavaScript, you don't have that. So you can protect it by using const and then assigning it. And then whatever you do to that array, it will remain an array. You cannot change the data type. And also this won't be allowed. So the only thing you can do, you can probably push and first remove all the other elements and then push instead of reassigning like this to one element.
Okay.
So the elements themselves, you can still touch them, but then you cannot touch the array itself.
You cannot touch the array itself.
Yeah, you cannot reassign, meaning that this will remain an array. Because even this is blocking us. So the moment you are done, you know it's going to be an array. Now you need to use your array methods. You cannot try to reassign by saying now that is equals to just this. Meanwhile, with let, you can still do that. Are we together?
Yes, we're together.
All right. I hope
We
I
have
didn't
two more
confuse you.
hands.
Yes, they can come through.
All right. Okay. Katlego.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, you're live.
Yeah, just wanted to add on what Master Mugona is saying about the what is it this constant. What I can say is that the array itself is content is the same as in object. The object can be constant, but the properties they are not constant, meaning that you can change the properties, but not the object itself or an array.
Yes. So you're protecting the data type, but then you can still work with the properties in the object and add more and stuff like that. But then you cannot change that variable from an object to an array and vice versa. That's correct. And thanks for that. One more. I have a meeting. Actually, we have a meeting that we need to join. So Samsung, do you wanna come in? Was it Newo?
Nelson.
Nelson. Sorry about that. Nelson.
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand. Sorry, I'm fine.
Oh, okay. Thanks for that. Okay, guys, I think if there's no more questions, we can call it a day. We are going to see you tomorrow. We are going to focus on more things tomorrow, building up on what we already have. But before you go, working with branches on GitHub or Git actually, because there's Git and GitHub. Let me clear this. I'm going to create a new branch and I'm going to call this actually get checkout. So this is a shorthand for checking out a new branch and creating a new branch. Get checkout dash B and then the name of the branch. So this one I'll just say second branch. I don't know what to call it because there's a few things that I took out from the first code that I did. And then to check which branch you're on, it's simply git branch. And as you can see, we have main and second branch. Sorry about that. We're going to git add everything, git commit. I'm not going to check anymore because we're running out of time. Working with arrays, extended. And then I can git push. Okay, I'm supposed to use git push set upstream, shorthand for u, dash u, origin, and then this is going to be second branch. So that's done. And then when I come back this side, we currently have one, GitHub does not auto refresh. Come back, we now have our second branch. So all the things that I just commented are on the second file. Actually, it's the same file, but then different branches. So you guys can check that out because I sent the link. We should have the different branches looking like this. So that's pretty much it.
Could we quickly show them just to install the live server extension? They're gonna need it for tomorrow on VS Code.
Oh, the live server, which I
Yes.
already have here. So to install live server, on the left panel, you come here to the extensions and you're going to look for live server. I already have it, but you're going to look for live server. Think there's different live servers. This is the one that I'm using, and it has 65 million downloads. So it should be the highest on the list. Please install that one. The other ones are not really sure how they work. Never really used them before. So install that one, make sure it's enabled. If it looks like this, that means it's enabled. You can disable it. If it's installed, it should show you uninstall button.
All right. Thank you for such an informative session, Vogona. Thank you for everyone for joining. We will resume tomorrow, 9 a.m., and we will tackle um, other modules, other aspects of JavaScript that we just need to a refresher on and need to iron out. Thank you for all the participation. It's been a lively interaction. Have a wonderful rest of your day. We will see you tomorrow. Thank you.
All right, guys. Cheers. Take care.